Well, Ms. Pat said that on Mother's Day, the cake and ice cream, the men can have some too. Yeah. Thought I was very generous. We got a Mother's Day video. I've actually got 2 of them. So actually what I'm doing today, I'm multitasking some of my slides. If you saw the video special we did this week, it's an 80-minute special on the 70th anniversary of Israel. What I did in that video is I took the historical content of the last 100 years in Israel, some of the highlights, and used scripture to support why they were important. Today what I'm doing is I'm going to take the biblical portion of why it's important and use a few of the videos to support the scripture. So we're going to take a different approach to it today. So I'm multitasking a few of the slides. So if you saw some of it, if you watched it yesterday, or if you're going to watch it in the future, you'll see a few of the slides are the same, but overall the context is talking about the same thing from 2 different perspectives. In the video, we took breaks for Mother's Day. So I wanted to share those videos with you. The first one is simply called Mom. You know how busy moms are? So this is our tribute and thank you to Mom. So let's play the first one.
This spring, only one hero can save her family and prevent disaster.
Mom, we're gonna be late for school!
I don't think so. Whoa.
Experience the phenomenon that critics are calling inspiring.
Mom, I can't find number 17!
Come on, Billy! Dig deep!
A lot of fun. And pure genius.
Mom, where's my phone?
Table.
Keys.
Bedroom.
Dragon Man?
Under the couch between the monkey and the flip-flop.
How does she do that?
Created by God to demonstrate his love with grace, elegance, and poise.
Hey, honey, have you seen my butane torch?
You know who's laughing the most? The moms. You ever felt you've been pulled in all these different directions? I say, wow. All right, if that wasn't bad enough, this year, they got Mom the sequel. All right, let's play the second one. Mom the sequel.
Last year, she amazed her family. But now...
Mom, my science project is due tomorrow.
Jeremy hates me.
When chaos strikes...
Mom, I want to play Xbox.
No, it's my turn.
her true powers will be revealed.
Hey, honey, your mom said she's gonna stop by later. Is that okay?
Do you hear that?
I don't hear anything.
Exactly.
I'm painting.
Natalie, what did you do?
How did she know?
Gifted by God with the power to read minds.
I don't have any homework.
No.
I mean, I did all my homework.
No.
Well, I did some of it.
No.
Fine, I haven't started yet.
There's the truth.
The wisdom to restore peace.
He said, that's it. We're finished. So sick of this texting.
What? Let me see that. Wait, this says sick of this testing, not texting.
All right. He was taking the ACT. Thanks, Mom.
The insight to see the future.
I forgot to think of a science project.
Yeah, I thought you might.
Yes!
With a verse of unlimited capacity. And her secret weapon, the look.
Yoink.
Hey. Oh, come on, Billy.
These abilities combine to form the ultimate example of warmth, tenderness, and dignity. She is Mom.
How do you like my new ride?
Grandma!
Mom?
I couldn't help it. You know, it's funny, the satire that moms do all that. It's over their lifetime. You know, you watch your kids grow up, you watch the moms like always into doing something. Anyway, I said, well, we need to do that as a special tribute. Happy Mother's Day. Now to get serious. It's hard to get serious after that. Oh. All right, this weekend especially, begins Israel and their 70th anniversary. As Israel enjoys their 70th anniversary, the world's eyes are focused on Jerusalem. On Jerusalem. You watch the news, you watch the stories, many of the newscasters, some of the most important newscasters in the world are all going to be in Jerusalem this weekend. Meanwhile, around the rest of the world, there's an anti-Semitism that's rising in and around Jerusalem. I don't know if you've seen what's going on, but we've been talking about this for the last 6 weeks. That began even back as far as December with Turkey, trying to rally everyone to begin walking and marching to Jerusalem to be there on the anniversary this weekend and to be there when the United States opens up their embassy for their ribbon cutting on Monday. The reason I'm bringing this out today, it was like a small time capsule of what we're looking at this weekend of an end-time prophecy from what Jesus Christ talks about. So what I want to do today is I'm going to take a part of the history of the last 100 years of Israel and talk about prophecy and put it into perspective and show you what we're looking at today and how God may very well be giving us the insight of things that we're going to be looking at an end time. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about it through the verse of Matthew 24, verse 32 through 34. It is the parable of the fig tree. The parable of the fig tree. So that's what we're going to talk about today, the parable of the fig tree and Israel. We're going to put into context the events that's going on this weekend that's taking place. Look what Jesus Christ says about the parable. Now learn the parable of the fig tree. You ever wonder why there's so many people who have the scenarios at the end time all over the map? I mean, when you talk to people about prophecy, they're from one end of the spectrum to another. And that's why people say, well, he's going to come back yesterday. Because you look at yesterday and all these people talking about all these events that's taking place, that Jesus Christ is coming back. How can so many people have it so wrong? Well, it's really simple. Summed up, if you had nothing else to understand, is in the understanding of what we just read. It's a parable. If you understand what Jesus said about the parable, you would see why everybody has it so wrong. Look in Matthew chapter 13. He says, and the disciples came and said to him, why do you speak to them in parables? The parable of the fig tree is a parable. He says, I'm going to tell you a parable of the fig tree. And Jesus answered and said to them, because it is given unto you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. So now, very simply, in Matthew 24, Luke 21, we're looking at with Jesus Christ's own words, where he focuses on something that's so important. It's the end time. You read in the beginning of Matthew 24, we talks about Jerusalem. When him and his disciples come walking into Jerusalem, I said, we just lit up the room. You're just trying to follow it, had all the lights out, so you couldn't see the scripture. But when they come walking in, he says, when will these things be? So here in front of our very eyes, Jesus Christ lays out step by step things to look for, and then says it's a parable. So you're not going to be able to read what it is unless he wants you to understand. So the rest of the world who simply doesn't understand prophecy, doesn't understand the commandments, doesn't know who Israel is, does not know who the players are, the countries around the world who constitute the modern day Israel and all the nations, not just Jerusalem or the Jews who are in Israel, who claim to be all of Israel. When you don't know all of the players, when you don't understand the prophecy, the events, the end time, you look at the scripture, then you have no clue what's going on. Therefore, when you look at Matthew, you say, oh, I understand that. And so then you got thousands of different scenarios. Why? Because it was real simple. Jesus said it's not for them to know. In fact, when it gets down to the very end, Jesus says when it actually begins to happen, it's going to catch them unaware because they won't have a clue. They'll be going about just like we said with Noah, and they'll just go their very, very day of life. You know, going to work, coming home, taking care of the kids. Or just like with Lot. Same time, they going doing everything they were supposed to be doing all day long, living an immoral life. Next thing you know, the city's gone. And Jesus Christ says, just like it's going to be in the time at the end. So that's why we have the parable of what we're looking at, why so many things are taking place. So this past week, what we did on our News Nuggets and Insights, we took and we gave a 80-minute special. So if you go look at it down the road, if you look at the date, you go to the website, and you can pull up all of the old ones, and you can look at this special. And we've got, I think, about 11 videos in it. And it tells a story of Israel through the last 100 years, focusing on some very important events, and a few of those I'm going to share with you today. So Israel today. So now we're going to talk about the timeline of a modern day Israel today and how it affects you and I and the end time. All right, so now let's take a few of the events that's taking place right now, being prepared for this weekend. The U.S. Embassy is going to open up this Monday, May 14th, amongst the Palestinian outcry. And if you haven't been watching the news, I've actually got a news clip to show you that's taking place. Here's one of the pictures of the embassy where they'll be working at in the courtyard where they're at. And I love this picture. This is a sign pointing the way to the U.S. Embassy. The United States is the first country in the world to recognize Jerusalem as the capital. And Israel will be the first nation on this earth to recognize Jerusalem as the capital when Jesus Christ steps foot on this earth. So you begin to see a parallel what's taking place. Now, the reason I like this picture, it's got in the different languages of the area, but you know who's putting that picture up? The mayor of Jerusalem. He's actually up there helping hang signs to welcome the United States to Jerusalem. There's the mayor that's putting that up. I got a couple more pictures. All right, so here's the American flag on the roadway going to the embassy. I thought this was great. They got the American flag implanted into the ground, showing the U.S. flag. I said, wow, what a great idea. Because, see, Israel talks about the land. So this land has been donated over to America for their land. Remember when the Israelites walked into the promised land, they said, everywhere you place your foot. Remember that? And that's why today you have all those footprints, and they recognize the footprints, and that's why the Arabs hate that. That's why they'll pick their shoes off and throw them at people. Because it's like an anti-Israel thing. They want to throw the shoes. So the American flag is designed in flowers at the entrance to the new embassy in Jerusalem, scheduled to open up on Monday, May 14th. Here now, they're also putting up the American flag next to the Israeli flag on the roads that's paving the way to the embassy. So they have opened up their carpets, they have opened all their doors, and they're giving us a huge welcome to come into the country of Israel. Now, why is this important? There's a scripture and a prophecy that says that no longer will Ephraim vex Judah, and the envy of Judah will no longer be against Ephraim. So it's a type. What you're looking at now is like a little small type of what's going to be coming down the road when it finally gets to the end time. So when God puts them all back together. And it's interesting is that Britain was the country that prepared the way through the Balfour Declaration in 1917, which I'm going to show you in a few minutes, that opened the way to bring the land back to Israel's hands. And it was the United States who opened up the finances, believe it or not, and the way to recognize, the very first country to recognize Israel as a state. So you see in what God has done is he's laid out in type, putting these back together for an end time when Jesus Christ comes back and he pulls everyone back together again. Now I got one more picture, and I thought this was so unique from a business point of view, from a businessman. Look what the sign says. Now he's on a building that's being constructed right now. So it says, Mazel Tov on your decision to move your embassy to Jerusalem. P.S. If you're looking for a developer, call Johnny. I said, how creative. I said, that would get the president's, he said, now that guy's got some initiative. He said, on this big old billboard, by the way, if you need a construction guy, give me a call. I thought that was so cool when somebody did that. All righty. Now, seriously, what's going on? Let's take a look at what's actually going on now. Well, all of these things are preparing the way. The rest of the world is not happy. The majority of the world hates what's going on. In fact, Turkey has put together a 57-nation alliance to try to stop all of these events and eventually drive Israel back to the sea. All that's going on. So now, Hezbollah, now this is an amazing story. So I heard last night some people estimated maybe 130,000 rockets. Hezbollah has 120,000 rockets in the Golan Heights pointed at Israel. Every single day, you and I wake up, we turn the news on, we put our music on, or simply just get dressed or go to work, or do whatever we're doing. Israel, every single day, has to wake up and be prepared for war. Every day, every man, woman, and child. Everybody in that nation stands and fights for their nation as they're going through things. The Iranian troops, the rockets inside firing at Israel. I got a video clip of that in just a couple of minutes. At the southern borders and on the west is that the continuing growing protests on the west and the southern borders, which is going to bring up this weekend possibly tens of thousands, and there are even some people are saying hundreds of thousands of protesters who want to break through the fence. This weekend could be traumatic like we've not seen in many, many years. In addition, in Lebanon, there's terrorist groups operating inside and outside of Lebanon, constantly going and fighting and attacking Israel. This they wake up to every single day. So what are we looking at here? It says Iran and terrorist organizations in Lebanon waged to his country. He said, I had a title up here. I must have put it at the wrong point. But this is talking about Benjamin Netanyahu said that Iran and terrorist organizations inside Lebanon were a danger to his country. And he said, the unfortunate thing is that as ISIS compresses, Iran moves in. So what Iran is doing, whether people realize it or not, is the vacuum comes and ISIS is being suppressed. It's left a vacuum. So what Iran has done is they're moving in their armies and their military to help train the people in that area to use their weapons to shoot into Israel. And they're doing it here, they're doing it in Yemen, and they're doing it in many other countries, and they're trying to create a bridge, as Netanyahu says, is that it is trying to establish its continuous empire surrounding the Middle East. From south in Yemen, is also trying to create a land bridge from Iran to Iraq, from Syria, Lebanon, and Gaza. He said this is a very dangerous development for our region. Now, I got about a 2-minute clip just to show you what's taking place just this week in the arguments. So if we get that ready, let's play that clip now.
But as we see progress on the Korean Peninsula, there is escalating tension that could be headed potentially towards all-out war between Iran and Israel tonight. Since the U.S. exit from the Iran deal, their foreign minister now saying that they will seek industrial-scale enrichment if the deal completely falls apart. Protests today in the streets of Tehran. Benjamin Hall reports from our Jerusalem bureau tonight. Benjamin.
Yeah, hi, Martha. Although there is a relative calm in Israel today, there is also a sense that things have shifted, that there is now a pushback against Iran in the region after years of them encroaching on Israel's borders. And we saw that in a major way yesterday. We're now learning more about those extensive, coordinated strikes carried out by Israel in Syria against Israeli targets. The defense minister saying they destroyed almost all of Iran's military facilities in the country, with 70 different strikes targeting 50 military sites. The US and Russia were notified ahead of the offensive, which saw them hit Iranian intelligence sites, logistics and military headquarters, ammo dumps and rocket launchers. Those strikes were in retaliation to Iranian rocket fire into the Golan Heights a day earlier. Today, Iran responded for the first time since the attack. In fiery rhetoric, the Supreme Leader, Khatami, to chants of death to America and death to Israel, warned that Tel Aviv and Haifa will be destroyed if Israel acts foolishly. And Israel is also facing major protests in the south of the country at the Gazan border. The protests come just 3 days ahead of what the Hamas leader says will be a march by tens of thousands who could burst through the border fence and into Israel. On Monday, he compared the crowd to a starving tiger. And those protests will also coincide with the opening of the new US embassy in Jerusalem, which is a decision many people are not happy with. And as a result, there has been heightened security in Jerusalem, not least because Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump and Steve Mnuchin are coming, along with other White House officials. Here in Israel, at least, that will be greatly cheered.
So as you can see, while there's a lot of things to be cheered for, there's a lot of concern that's going on. Israel knows that these things are coming, and they're preparing for them, knowing that these things are going to happen. So now look at the map. Take a look at this map. Here we have Jerusalem, and the Bible tells us, and we can see in Luke 21, we'll talk about it later, but I just want to mention it here, is Luke 21:20 says, when you see armies surround Jerusalem, then know no devastation is getting near. So here we have in type. This is not what's coming. I mean, but it is a type of what's coming, of armies surrounding. We are not there yet, but we will get there. There's many things that hasn't taken place. But what has God given us here? What I thought was so vivid when you put all this stuff together and you research and you study is that in this little small encapsulated time period of the 70th anniversary, what God has allowed us to see here is a type of what's coming in the very near future. So what he's looking at in this parable, what the world's seeing, they don't understand. But when you look at it through God's eyes and you put the parameters to see within this small spectrum, you're seeing prophecy being fulfilled in type right before your very eyes. And these things are really important that we need to understand what's taking place, because Jesus says if you don't understand, you're going to be caught unaware. So what did he do? He's allowed events to take place today so that you and I, those that he's calling out of this world, can look at these things and say, whoa, I read this in the Bible. Let me get into that Bible and go back and find where that's at, so that you don't get caught unaware of all these things that's going on. All right, so there's my headline, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. I put it toward the end. So now let's take a look at the timelines of the events in light of the fig tree. While all of this is going on, remember now, Matthew 24 says, when you see these things happening, Matthew 24, verse 32, says, now learn the parable of the fig tree. When its branches already become tender and it puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So also when you see all these things, you shall know that it is near, even at the door. We're going to begin to see a time when events are going to escalate to the point that you know is utter devastation is actually coming. We know that there'll be a point of a contract, a peace contract that is signed. There'll be a king in the south pushing against a king in the north. Is Iran one of the kings of the south rallying people around? Is in 83 of the Psalms 83. Well, we don't know yet. Could it be Turkey who's trying to rally 57 nations around trying to destroy Israel? More than likely, that's a real possibility that that's going to take place when it looks like they may just remove Iran from the area and come in and take in their own forces, like you're seeing taking place in Europe as they tried to define a united nation of Europe. So now, where are we at in the timeline of the fig tree? All right, so many people, if you talk to them around the world, if you said, give me your experience, your knowledge, your understanding of prophecy, tell me, where do you think we are at the beginning of the season of the fig tree? Many people will tell you it began in 1917. Or if you talk to others, they will believe that it began when the nation of Israel began in 1948. Yet there are others that also believe it could be 1967 when Jerusalem that was taken over total control by Israel. So now if you were looking at Matthew 24 and you were reading the verses where Jesus Christ said, now hear the parable of the fig tree, which year would you pick? Actually, in Matthew 24 and Luke 21, because they're parallel scriptures of two different books, is that Bible gives us an understanding. So we need to let the Bible tell us. We can't just go pick the story. We have to let the Bible explain when it is. So Matthew 24 and verse 34 says this, truly I say unto you that this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Obviously, it's not the generation he talked to back then when he told the story 2,000 years ago. They're dead and gone. It has to be talking about the generation that is alive when the events that he spoke about in Matthew 24 come to pass. It's saying that that generation shall not pass till these things be fulfilled. All right, so that's one of the first insights that we know that we're getting close to an end-time scenario when these things take place. And Jesus says, heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. Amazing that Jesus' words are so important that heaven and earth is going to be gone, but his words are going to stay because they're eternal words. So what are we looking at? The season of the fig tree. All right, so what are we looking at for the season of the fig tree for that generation that shall not pass? All right, so there's our key. So now let's go look at this generation shall not pass. Now, how long is a generation? Now, most of you should know that. If you knew, the Bible actually tells us how long a generation is. So when we go back and look at the Bible to define itself, then we're going to look at a generation. We have to know how long that period of time is. So when Jesus Christ is telling us, we're still in Matthew 24, and he says, when these things begin to come to pass, that generation shall not pass. So how long is a generation? Psalm 90, verse 10, actually tells us how long that is. The days of our years are 80 years and 10. 70 years. 70 years. And then it goes on and says, but if by reason of strength they may be 80. So Jesus is saying that the time of when these things begin to happen, 70 or 80 years is going to pass when they all take place. Now that's a pretty wide berth. That's a pretty wide berth. Yet their strength and their labor and sorrow, for soon it shall be cut off and we shall fly away. It's interesting that that typology is used of flying away when people say, well, they're going to be going to heaven there when you die. Well, actually, you're not. But you will be ascending to meet Jesus in the clouds. And if you want to say fly away there, well, of course, you'll get as far as the clouds, and then you're going to come back to earth where Jesus Christ is going to be. All right, so now, when does it start? That's going to be the key. All right, so now we got it pinned down. We're going to be 70 to 80 years. But there's another problem in Revelation. So I won't even go there yet. But in Revelation, it says when the trump was about to sound, Jesus stops him from blowing the trumpet. He says, go again and warn the world. So at whatever given time a person thinks they got it figured out, you're not going to figure it out. When Jesus Christ, whose words are going to last forever, says, I don't even know when it is. You know, there's no insider trading going on at the end of the world. It's because even Jesus doesn't know. But this gives us the idea when it starts. All right, now we're trying to figure when, 1917, 48, or 1967, remember? When does it start? This tells us about when it starts, within a few years. For then there shall be great tribulation, such was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. So now we've got a scripture saying we're going to shorten time. Revelation says we're going to extend time. This one says we're going to shorten it. So depending on how things move into this, But now we're looking at a time in the history of mankind when it is possible to destroy, obliterate, remove every single man, woman, and child off the face of the earth. God says, I'm going to have to stop it before it gets to that stage. So when is that? So now let's go back to our map. So now we said, we're back here now, no flesh should be saved. So now if we picked this point, where would we go? At what point in man's history did we come to when it was possible to destroy all flesh off the face of the earth? Was it possible in 1917? No. Mankind did a pretty good job of trying to. World War I. I mean, there was the war to end all wars. I mean, there wasn't enough manpower, there wasn't enough ammunition, there wasn't enough bombs, there wasn't enough mustard gas to destroy the face of the earth. All right, so we can't count on 1917. So let's go to now 1967, the time of the taking of Jerusalem. Was it possible then? Absolutely. However, by 1967, over a decade or two has passed by where the nuclear armaments had reached the point that mankind could destroy itself many times over. So those two obviously cannot be the time that Jesus Christ is talking about. We have to be talking about the time around 1948 of the establishment of the state of Israel, and from that time forward, so 1948 to somewhere around 1950. Somewhere in those years, there was enough nuclear weapons between the United States and Russia that they said they could destroy the earth 70 times over. So when we look at what Jesus Christ is talking about in Matthew 24, and we want a time frame, our beginning count28, around, you can't say 1948, but somewhere around this period within the next few years to 2018 brings us 70 years. So now when you look at all the events and people think that we're getting very close to the end time, well, now we have the Bible pointing us to a time frame of concern. But the Psalm said it could be up to 80 years. All right? And Revelation said they could extend it even further. So at some point in time, given that Jesus Christ is telling us that what we're looking at is obvious as one thing. In the parable of the fig tree, when the season begins to develop, when the summer's coming, the leaves begin to open up, began somewhere around 1948. That would be the season of the fig tree. So now that is the parable in the area that we're looking at. Now trying to figure all the points out is not my point today. What I'm trying to do is give us the season and why these events are important and why I'm even covering this story for us today in God's holy word. Now, while there are very specific prophecies that are yet to be fulfilled, the season to which we are to watch for when they shall be fulfilled has been developing for the past 70 years. For example, 1967. There had to be a way that Israel controlled all of Jerusalem. Otherwise, the prophecy of Luke 21, verse 20, of armies surrounding Jerusalem would have been void. It would have been useless. Jesus Christ would have never put it into Scripture. So it had to come to a point in prophecy to understand that Israel would control Jerusalem one more time. So that's what we're looking at. So now we get the time frame and the scenario of what's going on. Now, I love this 10 Jubilee prophecy. Some of you may have heard it. We've used it in the past. I used it in the special yesterday, but not everybody gets NNI, the News Nuggets and Insights, though they can. If they, you can put them in their email every Friday morning, or you can go to the website. And every News Nuggets and Insights for the last 2 years now, they're in the archives that you can go up there and watch any of them at any given time. And we actually use those for referencing stories. For example, North Korea. Over a year ago, we put in News Nuggets and Insights that North Korea will not go to war. And this is why. And we told you back then we don't have to worry about them going to war. Eventually, they're going to bring it to a heightened state that they'll go into a point where they need to get something. When they get what they want, then they will back away again and they'll stop and negotiate for peace. And we said that over a year ago. Why do we know that? Because we understand the prophecies that Jesus Christ gave us, and that's not the time frame or the scenario for nuclear war. So we didn't have to worry about that right now. You know, when you begin to get all these concerns of all the stuff that's going on around the world, put it in light of the Bible prophecy and the understanding you have, and you can be given a lot more peace than you ever realized. Yeah, it's not going to be pleasant to watch it all, but you know that these things can't happen yet because prophecy shows that. For example, is Iran going to get a nuclear weapon and blow up Israel? No. Why? Because there's people in Israel at the return of Jesus Christ. If the nuclear weapon goes off, nobody could live there. So that's not going to be the issue here. What will be the issue here, are they going to be able to muster the armies to surround Jerusalem, as in Luke 21? See, that's what you would begin to look at. So anyway, everything else is smoke and screens. So, you know, get your mind focused, understand the Scripture, and develop it from there, and Jesus Christ will unlay the understanding you need to give you peace. So now, in the 10 Jubilee prophecy, watch how close this comes. Watch how close this comes to being accurate. This is from a rabbi, Judah ben Samuel. He lived 1150 to 1217. When the Ottomans conquered Jerusalem, they will rule over Jerusalem for 8 Jubilees. And afterwards, Jerusalem will become a no man's land for 1 Jubilee. And then in the 9th Jubilee, it will once again come back to the possession of the Jewish nation, which would signify the beginning of the Messianic reign, which would be at the end of the 9th, bringing you to the 10th, would be the 10th Jubilee in the return of Jesus Christ. So now let's look at that prophecy of what he actually gave. It is believed he developed that prophecy in the last year of his life, and he died in 2017. What was very interesting is exactly 300 years later, the Ottomans did conquer Jerusalem in 1517. Now in this prophecy, he said that they would rule for 8 Jubilees. All right, so, and they ruled until they were removed by the British in 1917. That's a total of 400 years or 8 Jubilees, which is exactly what he wrote. He's right on target so far. Afterwards, Jerusalem would become a no man's land for 1 Jubilee. So from 1917 to 1967, 1 Jubilee, it was through the hands of the British Empire, and it was working with multitude of the nations. There were 3 nations especially who were around Jerusalem, and it was given to all the different countries to be able to interact with one another. The British couldn't keep peace, and they finally turned it over to the UN and said, this is more than we can handle, you guys fix it. And so until 67, when Israel took complete control from 17 to 67, a period of 50 years, it's called no man's land, because Israel didn't have it yet. That was, okay, and that's toward the end of the 9th Jubilee. So they will once again come back to the possession of the Jewish nation, which would signify the beginning of the Messianic end. So from 67, when they took control, the next Jubilee brings you to 2017, which is the 10th Jubilee. And so he's pretty close. Now, people thought that Christ would come back last year, but they don't understand that the day of the Lord is not one specific day. It's a period of time. And so it is quite possible that what we have entered into is a period that Jesus Christ tells us is the day of the Lord. It's the beginning of the time of things happening that's going to bring about the ushering and the return of Jesus Christ. How long does that last? It doesn't tell us. It could be 10, 20, or 30 years. We don't know. That's why we watch. So now, I thought that was pretty interesting. So now, let's go and take that time frame, what we're looking at in Jerusalem, from the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD for the next 1900 years. Jerusalem would endure one overthrow after another, as one country and one faith overthrew each other, until the Balfour Declaration in 1917. The Balfour Declaration was a public statement issued by the British government in 1917 during World War I, announcing support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. So it was the British who won the war against the Ottoman Turks, who actually brought in to give the homeland to the Jews in 1917. So now in our timeline, actually I've got just there's no sound with this, by the way. So what you're looking at is General Allenby. He was marching into Jerusalem for the first time. It was so important at this event. It was staged, and they had it filmed very carefully to record this for history. So this was so important. In fact, they played these video clips in movie houses around the country because it was so important of the British people taking over control of Jerusalem and then taking and getting with the different religions of the area and giving them recognition to be able to work. So after the fall of the 400-year reign of the Ottoman Turks, Jerusalem is now in the hands of the British. It is called the Balfour Declaration in 1917, which ended the 400 years of the Ottoman Turk rule. So now, Israel has a homeland. So now let's look at Isaiah. What does the Bible say about Isaiah? It says, and he will lift up a standard for the nations. He will assemble the banished ones of Israel. He will gather the dispersed. You hear about Israel talking about the diaspora. And the diaspora simply means is those who have been displaced around the world, that Jesus Christ is going to bring them back. So the Jews today believe that all of the nation of Israel is now come back, which they don't understand. That is not all of Israel over there. In fact, the people who, like us, who believe that there's still the two separate nations until Jesus Christ puts it all back together, we're anti-Semitic. They're thinking that we're against Israel, and we're not. It's simply that they don't understand prophecy of what's actually taking place. So he says, in the gathering for the four corners of the earth, and the adversaries of Judah shall be cut off, and Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah shall not vex Ephraim. So we're coming to a time that's pointing forward to the return of Jesus Christ, but you're beginning to see in type. This is the physical pointing to the spiritual, that Jesus Christ is going to actually take place when he returns. This is actually the declaration of the Balfour Declaration. This is to Lord Rothschild, and he says that I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with the Jewish Zionist aspiration, which has been submitted to and approved by the cabinet. So they took this declaration and said that our sympathies and our hearts are with the Jewish people, and that we're going to give you back a homeland. It also is the beginning of the conflict that exists today. This is a type that Satan does not want Israel to exist today. And so you're seeing the conflict again from the physical to the spiritual. And what we're seeing in the physical is what's coming, because God says we wrestle not against the flesh and blood. So all of these conflicts that you're seeing, the absolute hatred toward this nation, and like you saw in some of the video clip that I just showed you from the news, the fightings, the burnings, you name it, the killings, is all because of the hatred of Satan toward God and his people. And so you're seeing all that beginning. And so the Balfour Declaration, it's amazing that this book was called The Origins of the Arab-Israeli Conflict, which is the type from the book of Genesis till now. You see the conflict between God and Satan all the way through till today. So Israel became a vast wasteland during those 400 years. Now, I'm going to show you a picture in just a moment. You might remember this back from 2 years ago in a sermon I gave at the Feast of Tabernacles. This is the land, what it looked like in the hands of the Ottoman Turks for 400 years, what it became, and then what it looks like in the hands of Israel today. And so watch what the difference is. This is from Mark Twain's visit to Lebanon, Syria, and the Holy Land in 1867, and this is a quote. A desolate country whose soil is rich enough but is given wholly over to weeds. A silent, mournful expanse, a desolation. We never saw a human being the whole route, hardly a tree or a shrub anywhere. Even the olive tree and the cactus, whose fast friends are a worthless soil, almost deserted the country. That was his conveying of what he saw. And this is what he actually saw. That's the actual picture that they took when they were going through that homeland. That was part of the land back then. So now if you want to, we did a lot more, and I got just a couple slides from that series that I gave in the sermon back two years ago. So from the vault, the sermon was given in 2016. It's called The Millennial Pioneers. So you can go online and you can find Millennial Pioneers. If you want to see more about the story on Israel, you can go back and you can find it called Millennial Pioneers. We call it From the Vault. So now, this is what God said it would become when he comes back. And Israel shall blossom and bud and fill the face of the world with fruit, and the Holy One of Israel has glorified you. So now look at the land what it's coming back to. Now, we're talking, remember, this whole sermon is in type, remember? This whole thing is type what's coming. This says that the whole world is going to come back. So what we're looking at that you and I are going to be a part of, try to imagine this now. At the beginning of the millennial reign, most of the world is destroyed. Earthquakes, epidemics, pestilence, wars, blood so high they said it's blood up to the bridle of a horse in some areas. That when you come and we take over, reign with Jesus Christ for 1,000 years, this earth is going to look very similar to what you saw with Mark Twain. And for 1,000 years, we're going to be bringing back this whole entire earth back to the condition it was when God gave it to him in the book of Genesis with Adam and Eve. And it's going to be put back into this incredible condition that this world's going to be into. But that's part of the job that you and I have. So what God's allowing us to see in type is bring Israel back now so that we can see how it's going to be when Jesus Christ returns. Here's just 4 more pictures I brought in just to show you a little bit of the land of Israel today. Look at the farmlands. Look how they brought the water in. They got salinity plants where they desalinize water to be able to give. And they're actually using the water and selling it to the other nations around them who are trying to destroy them, which is absolutely insane. But that's what's going on right now. Now try to imagine those 2 pictures, because that's the imagine that you're going to put in your mind when Jesus Christ comes back. Because he says he's going to take those wastelands, he's going to make them flourish again. And you're going to be a part of that, just like you're looking at in these pictures. They have tourism now. They're one of the largest tourist areas in that part of the region. And look at the city. I believe this is Tel Aviv. Right there on the sea, just this beautiful land what they've brought and been able to create. Now, in the middle of it, don't get me wrong, it's becoming one of the vilest places of belief on the earth. Now, on the one side, there's this incredible love and love of country and patriotism, things that we can respect. But they're one of the first nations to recognize homosexuality. So in the mix of all this is why God's going to come back and put it all straight again. That we're looking at, though, is what's coming with Jesus Christ. So I'm not trying to just whitewash everything that's over there, but don't forget what God says. You bless Israel, you be blessed. The United States is also Israel. And what people don't understand when they try to destroy and curse this nation, even the people in this nation who try to curse this nation, they're bringing about curses upon themselves, and they don't understand it. Why? Because they don't know the players. They don't realize who we are as a nation. We are Israel. And we're going to show that when Jesus Christ returns back to this earth. So now I need to move on because I got some videos at the end I want to play. I think on my clock, I think I still got about 20 minutes, but I need to move on. But this I thought was important stuff on this year, on this particular weekend. I've been really blessed having news nuggets and insights, because I got to tell you, sometimes when I come up and do a sermon, important sermons, scriptural sermons, talking about spiritual edification. But when there was so much news going on around the world, inside me I was torn. I said, man, how can I deliver the sermon when I need to talk about this other stuff? These things are so important for the rest of the world. Maybe we understand it, but the world doesn't. So now with news nuggets and insights, God give us the way just to every single week now talk about those things. So when we come here, I can talk about just the spiritual significance of our spiritual development as human beings and families and people and the plan of God. So with news nuggets and insights, I haven't had to bring these type of sermons in as much as I used to, because now we've got another format that gives us that opportunity for the outreach. But today I wanted to bring it in because it was important because of the 70th anniversary of Israel. So now we got from 1917, 33 to 33, we see this mass migration now of the Jewish people beginning to come back into the homeland around Jerusalem through persecution and the Nazis. It was through the Jewish Holocaust, while at the same time inside of Jerusalem, they were constantly fighting with not only just the Arab nations, but the British themselves. And so we see the conflict that you saw in the prophecy. No longer they're going to vex each other. All right, so there won't be this envy and the vexing that's eventually going on. So eventually, by 1947, the British had thrown their hands up. They said they can't maintain peace. There were so many people coming back through the displacement of the Jews in Europe. Nobody wanted them even after the war. So they really had nowhere to go. So most of them began going back to the homeland. Now, in the special we showed yesterday, I got little video pieces that come in about here. All right, so now, like ancient Israel, the Jews were driven out by persecution. Again, we're looking at the type. We're looking at, now we had an end-time type, just like a former type. What we're looking at went on 38 through 45, 33 through 45, is going to be the same as is going to be at the end time with Jesus Christ. So the ancient Israelites were driven out through persecution. Look at Exodus 3. The Lord said, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and they have heard the cry of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. So I have came down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them to the land that flows good and large, to a land flowing with milk and honey. So in type, at the end time, just like with ancient Israel, at the end time when all of this goes on, God's going to come down, he's going to deliver his people one more time to the large land flowing with milk and honey. We're talking about the promised land. We're talking about the millennial reign with Jesus Christ. So we're beginning to see all this, but God's done something more. He's given it to us in our time so that we can understand what it was, because we got the historical records from the 30s and the 40s of what took place. So it's easy now to visualize what's coming. And I got to tell you something. I've been doing a lot of research and a lot of study of the time frame and the mindset of the people during those years. And I'm telling you, we are in that time today. The mindset of the people are just like it was back then. And they're looking out after themselves. They're allowing evil to take place because they don't want any problem. I even got a letter from a church leader in one of the church organizations says, all we want is God's people is to be left alone. In other words, go do whatever you guys want to do around the rest of the world. Just leave us alone. It was written in a newsletter. I read the letter. I couldn't believe it. I shared it with my wife, and she couldn't believe it. That's not why we were called. We were called in the advance. We're part of the advance team to warn this world what's coming. You want to know what's coming? Go back and look at the 30s and the 40s, and this time is going to be worse than that. Why do we know? Because Matthew 24 says so. It'll be a time unlike any other time in history. So when I look what's going on around Israel today, it's a time capsule, and I'm looking at the mindset around the world, and it's just like it was before the war. We need to get this understood in our heads today, because if we don't, we're going to be taken unaware. We're going to be pulling back. We're not going to have the courage to stand up and speak the truth. People who do that today, they're mocked, they're ridiculed, they're fired, they're sued, they're put in jail. And they're not even speaking God's truth yet. Wait till God takes his protection away. That time is coming, ladies and gentlemen, and we need to be ready. So another time of persecution driving out God's people. Revelation 12:17 says, the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. God's people have those. If you don't have the testimony of Jesus Christ, which is the spirit of prophecy, the Bible says so, and you're not keeping the commandments, then you're none of his. And the Sabbath day is one of those testimonies. By the way, Germany is rising up now and just met with the Pope yesterday. Did you see that? And they're condemning the United States, and the Pope stepping in with Germany, and they're telling them we need to be involved and we need to take our own future because we can't depend on the United States. In fact, we're going to cut them off. And the Pope's saying, yeah, and I'm going to be there to help them. You're beginning to see the alignment of the beast power coming to light at the end time. And we'll talk about that this Tuesday on News Nuggets and Insights. Those are the things we need to be aware of and keep telling everybody. Look at the fifth seal. So he went and he opened the fifth seal, and I saw under the souls of them that was slain for the word of God and for the testimony. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, O Lord, holy and true, you who do judge and avenge our blood on them that dwells on the earth. It says, and robes were given to every one of them, and it was said unto them that they should rest for a little season. Now, these are those who were martyred. These are those who are actually under the throne of Jesus Christ, as we're looking at the way it's portrayed here. Whether it's in type or how it's played out, we don't really know, because we know the dead know nothing. But what Jesus Christ is saying, he's like, from my own throne, I still hear the cries of my people through the centuries, is what we're looking at right here. And then those souls are crying out, how long, O Lord, till you avenge our souls? And he says, just rest for a little season, he said, until their fellow servants also and their brethren should be killed as they were, should be fulfilled. So Jesus Christ is talking about another coming martyrdom before the return of Jesus Christ. We want to see how that's going to be like? Go back and look at the 30s and the 40s, and you will begin to see what's taking place. And there is no isolation from the rest of the world. People are talking about the United States is taking an isolation position. You know what? That won't happen. It can't happen. It may stand alone, but it won't be isolated, because the world is too involved with one another. It's too involved with one another anymore. And there's going to be the interaction of the destroying of the growing, and it shows that the United States, because it will not repent, is going to be destroyed. Now, people need to understand that. When we're at home in our comfy little homes and a nice air conditioning, like I always tease about, I'd like to have some air conditioning when we're in the tribulation, because I don't like really being hot. So I better do what's right, because I ain't going to like it in a lake of fire, because it gets really hot there too. Same way with you. You know, we want to do what's right, and that's why we were called. All right, so now going on, let's look at the next stage. Back this up. The British in 1947, they couldn't fix the problem. Nobody's going to fix this problem. We need to understand that. Only Jesus Christ is going to fix this problem. The British, they threw their hands up and said, we can't fix the problem and the struggle that's going on in the Middle East. So in 1947, they turned it over to the UN. And they thought by giving Israel his homeland and giving them a state, it would make peace. No, it didn't. It made it worse. When they took over Jerusalem, it made it worse. It didn't get any better from that time. So now from 1948, now Israel has a homeland. And I believe at that point, we are the beginning of the time of the fig tree that Jesus Christ talks about. He also talks about a nation being born in a day. So shall the earth be made to give birth in one day? Or shall a nation be born at once, and as soon as Zion was in labor, she gave birth to her children? It's talking about a type of Israel being born. It's also talking about an end time for the return of Jesus Christ when he steps his foot on the Mount of Olives when he comes back. Modern day Israel, 1967 and the Six-Day War. Have you ever studied that? What a remarkable feat. It was a miracle of what Israel did during that time. In the Six-Day War, you know that war was over in 2 days. In the first 5 hours of the first day, Egypt was wiped out. 5 hours, the Egyptian army was destroyed. The Air Force couldn't even get off the ground. In a preemptive strike, Israel went out and went to every single Air Force first. They timed it. They went all the way around, across out of the Mediterranean Sea. They went across around the southwest, coming up from the other, and they went straight across from the north. And in precise timed strikes at every single airport that had those fighter jets, Israel struck precisely at the same time. They had absolutely no warning. They flew low so nobody could see them. They came in and they destroyed over 250 Egyptian planes. In the first 5 hours, they were destroyed. Immediately followed up by destroying their bridges so they couldn't bring the tanks in to come against Israel. Before even and the rest of the countries even knew it took place, before Syria had any clue of what was going on, or Lebanon, Egypt was destroyed. And nobody even knew it yet. Why? Because they cut off all communication. Even Israel wouldn't even talk to themselves because they didn't want anything to leak out what they were doing. And in the first day, the first 5 hours, Egypt was destroyed. Gave no hope for the rest of the countries. By the second day, they wiped out the rest of the country. The third day, Syria thought they could go back and make a stand, and within a matter of hours, Israel destroyed them. An incredible feat. They finally had to stop it. It was amazing. 6 days, it finally went. And they finally had peace. And on the seventh day, they rested. Kind of remembrance of 6,000 years and the 7,000 year, isn't it? All around what? Jerusalem. In type, what are we looking at? See what God's pictured for us here? When we begin to let his Bible tell us. So it says, when you see armies in Jerusalem, compassing Jerusalem, then you'll know that desolation is near. After only 19 years, the three Arab nations surrounding Israel, Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, formed an alliance to destroy Israel from existence. But in the preemptive strike, Israel overpowered all three in just 6 days. It was actually 3 days. But there was some more fighting that went on for just a few more days. So now, I want to share this with you because this is remarkable. This is what Israel had from 1948 to 1967. You see, that's the Wailing Wall? See that little bitty gate that they had here in this wall? It smelled. They were mocked. They were beaten. Every now and then they would try to go there for prayers. They couldn't go there without protection. That's what they had to the Wailing Wall. After 1967, this is what they did. They broke down those walls, and they want to open up for everyone. Moshe Dayan opened all that up so everybody could. He wasn't even a religious person, believe it or not. Moshe Dayan was not religious. He didn't think that he didn't know what the fight about religion was for. He didn't care. He just wanted his country. But anyway, God blessed him anyway because the prophecy, Jesus Christ said that he would be true to himself, even if no one else was. And this is what they have today. So I wanted to share that with you.
To do so in a narrow alley.
I don't know if you can hear this or not.
Dayan wants to remake this quarter into an open plaza that can hold thousands. The Wailing Wall is to be transformed, yet many want more than a short-term victory.
Can you hear it?
We were in a state of shock those first few days. For the first time, people could visit Jerusalem and the territory.
But for the moment, Israelis are triumphant.
Anyway, there's just a little clip that we put in there showing that they were triumphant after the 6-day war. They could finally go to the wall and pray. The bond of the brotherhood for two nations. This is President Truman, and in the original document, Truman had it correct. He recognized them as the Jewish state. And later when he heard that Israel had chosen the name Israel as their state rather than Jewish, you see he scratches it out to the state of Israel. Because they knew that these were the Jews. Everybody calls them the Jews today, but now they call it Israel. Because of this, and the name they gave them is the confusion that the people have today of who Israel is. But that is the Jews. It is the Jewish nation. I got a video here. It's about 3 minutes long. I want to play. It talked about how the people feel about Harry Truman and David Ben-Gurion, the first president of Israel. So if we get that ready, let's play that.
After talking with Weizmann, President Truman instructed the State Department to support the UN's plan for partition in Palestine, which they did reluctantly. Then on May 14, 1948, President Truman recognized the new state of Israel, just 11 minutes after the British mandate officially ended.
The United States recognizes the provisional government as the de facto authority of the new state of Israel.
10 days later, Chaim Weizmann visited the White House and gave the president a Torah scroll as a symbol of Israel's gratitude. Truman's response? Well, thanks, Cham. I've always wanted one of these. Regarding his support for Israel, Truman would later say, I am Cyrus.
When Harry Truman, in retirement, is honored for having recognized the state of Israel, the words that come out of his mouth are, I am Cyrus. He was the one who helped the Jews return to the homeland thousands of years later. And he was the one who helped the Jews rebuild the Third Jewish Commonwealth. And he was the one who history was fortunate enough to have in the right place in the right time. History was fortunate, the American people were fortunate, the Jewish people were fortunate. He was a true hero.
I bring to the American people the warm greetings of the people of Israel and our gratitude for the unfailing sympathy of America with our efforts for independence and regeneration.
David Ben-Gurion became the first Prime Minister of Israel and the first Minister of Defense, offices he held for 14 years. He was later named one of Time magazine's 100 most important people of the 20th century.
In our revival, we have been inspired by the message of our Bible and by the traditions of our ancient history, which elevate the dignity of man and the principle of justice, and which command us to love our neighbor.
When Ben-Gurion retired from political life, he moved to a kibbutz in the Negev desert, where he spent his final years writing a history of Israel. In November of 1973, Ben-Gurion suffered a cerebral hemorrhage that would take his life 2 weeks later. At the same time, his grandson Alon was a patient at a different hospital. He had fought as a paratrooper in the Yom Kippur War and was still recovering from serious injuries.
I knew about him, that he's in the hospital. He didn't know about me. When he asked where's Alon, they said, he's in the field, he's fine. Someone bought me a small TV, I'll never forget it. We saw the funeral through the television, black and white. Some of the doctors came and they sat with me. The doctors said it's an end of an era.
Since its rebirth, Israel has survived wars, terror attacks, and political opposition to its very existence. At the time of independence in 1948, there were just 650,000 Jews living in Israel. Today, that number has grown to more than 6 million, and every year, thousands more from around the world are coming home.
It's amazing when Jesus Christ comes back, he can stand on the Mount of Olives and he said, you finally came. And he said, no, I'm here the second time. You didn't accept me the first time. I'm here this time. And he's going to tell them I'm here to stay, by the way. Now, let's go one more before we're just about ready to bring this to a close right now. I thought this was really important, showing you the connection from 1917 with Great Britain. In 1948, the United States was the very first to recognize Israel as a state 11 minutes after midnight, the very first. And now we're the first nation to recognize them now in Jerusalem as their headquarters. And what no one believes, this bond, it's a bond of true brothers because they don't know who the nations are. This is not just a friendship. This is a family bond that goes all the way back from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob in the 12 tribes. All right, so this was on Mark Levin. It's only about a minute and a half. I wanted to play what Benjamin Netanyahu said about the move to Israel and recognizing Jerusalem today. Let's play that now.
How important was it to you, to the people of Israel, when President Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital and we're moving our embassy there in May?
I think all Israelis applauded. Just about all of them applauded. That's an understatement. There's a sense of history here. I said this to the president when I spoke to him in the Oval Office the other day. I said, we have a long memory. And we remember how 2,500 years ago, the great Persian king Cyrus issued the proclamation that allowed the exiles, the Jewish exiles in Babylon, to come back to Jerusalem and build our temple there. We remember how 100 years ago, the British foreign minister, Lord Balfour, issued the Balfour Declaration that recognized the rights of the Jewish people in our ancestral homeland. We remember 70 years ago how President Harry S. Truman recognized, I think he was the first leader to recognize the Jewish state. And we remember how President Donald J. Trump recognized Israel, or recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and decided to move the American embassy there. These are historic deeds. They will be remembered by our people that way for the ages.
They will be remembered that way for the ages. It's amazing how God has brought the bond of these two brothers. By the way, Ephraim was like the capital or the most important city in the north of Israel, whereas Jerusalem for the Jews of the king of Judah in the south. Those two nations now are coming together through this bond that's taking place. The plans are this May 14th, this coming Monday, is to cut the ribbon. We're going to be monitoring all weekend, and we're going to be monitoring on Monday, and we'll be preparing to talk about this in our news nuggets and insights that we'll be taping for next Friday on the 70th anniversary of Israel. God says in Zechariah, it says, "Behold, the day cometh, the Lord comes, and your spoil shall be divided in the midst." He says, "I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle," God says, "and the city shall be taken." He said, "The Lord shall go forth and fight against those nations as when he fought in the day of battle, and his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem in the east." All these things that we do for now is we're moving to that time when Jesus Christ is going to come back on this earth. Now, what I didn't play here was a longer video that you can catch in the special from yesterday that David Ben-Gurion said as they were celebrating after their birth, and everybody's joyous and they're dancing and they're celebrating in the streets. He was very sad because he knew what was coming. And so they asked him, "This is something you wanted all your life. This is something we've not had for over 400 years. Why are you not happy?" He says, "Because what they don't know is tomorrow we go to war." So as I close this out with this last video, and everyone is celebrating Israel's 70th anniversary, and as you see the patriotism of the people themselves for their nation, and the proud showing the flag and the honor and praise that they give to the country that God gave them, and the prayer of this song that you're about to hear that was put together before 12,000 people who spent an entire day in this auditorium choreographing this song with the lights and everything that's in it so that they can present this song to the rest of the world. I will close with the words from David Ben-Gurion that while they celebrate, what they don't know is at some point tomorrow, down the road, they will be going to war once again. So let's play this video and I'll bring this to a close.
על הדבש ועל העוקץ, על המר ועל הטוב, על בלנו התינוקת, שמור עלי הטוב. על האש המבוערת, על המים הזכים, על האיש ששם הביתה מן המרחקים. שיבני מעל החומה, מגדול מבחרתך וממלחמה. אנא שמור לי על כל אלה ועל אהובי נפשי, על שקט, על הבכי ועל זה השיר.
In the time of the parable of the fig tree, Jesus Christ is coming back to this earth. He's going to restore peace. He's going to restore the blessings that this world refuses to accept. And if he has to, he'll break the knees of everybody on this earth to make them enjoy the peace and repentance, to bring them to blessings. And that's the only way it's going to work. Until then, you and I need to understand the job that God's given to each one of us is to be able to warn the people so that the joy you saw in that song can be restored around the world and bring back to the greatness that God wants us to be. Praise God. Bless Israel. Bless the United States. And God bless all of you for helping support to help get this message out. If you know somebody, share this message with them. Show them the hope that Jesus Christ is giving to this world. Till next week, God be with you.